Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Pakistan today is on the brink of crisis. Our current situation is like that of a house on fire. What do I mean by this? Very simply, that our foreign reserves are so low that we may not be able to meet our debt servicing obligations on schedule. Our reserves have fallen to about 6 weeks of import cover. As a result, the reserves are being managed administratively. Curbs have been placed on currency conversion and remittance transactions. In other words, we have capital controls in practice. Furthermore, imports are also being managed administratively. Certain classes of letters of credit, dividend repatriations, and other payments are being delayed, if not denied altogether. Such administrative measures cannot be avoided. This is what one must do when one's house is on fire. The highest priority must be to extinguish the fire. Steps to forestall future fires, also known as structural reforms, have to wait. So how did we get into this situation in the first place? The reasons are both economic and political. The latest round began with the decision taken in 2021 by the PTI government to disregard the economic policy guidelines agreed to with the IMF in 2019 and to relax both spending and revenue constraints. The effects of this could be seen by early 2022. An IMF review at the time projected that the fiscal deficit would rise to 7% of GDP, up from 6% in fiscal 21. The latest State Bank report basically says that that fiscal deficit actually rose to 7.9%. Moving away from spending and revenue constraints had a follow-on effect on the current account deficit as well. That rose towards 4.7% of GDP after having been contained at less than 1% in fiscal 21. Of course, the fiscal stance was not the only reason for this deterioration. Rising oil and commodity prices and the start of the Ukraine war also had an effect. And of course, as we know, our current economic situation right now has also been affected adversely by the massive floods that occurred in the summer of 2022. But the expansionary fiscal stance was clearly a major factor. The sense of policy drift was apparent from such developments as the grant of special energy subsidies to some sectors, the grant of additional tax amnesties and preferential tax treatment for some sectors, and the lack of progress on a law to oversee the disposal of state-owned enterprises. And then in early 2022, a political crisis added more uncertainty to the mix. The PTI government lost a vote of confidence and was replaced by a coalition of opposition parties. The new coalition has been sending mixed economic signals, and a new agreement with the IMF is not yet in place. Meanwhile, our reserves continue to fall and the rupee continues to be under pressure. This is the third time since 2008 that we have found ourselves in a forex crisis with reserves below 2 months of import cover. Similar crises happened in 2013 and 2018. So why do we get into such situations repeatedly? There are both political and economic reasons for this. The political reason is the habit of the government of the day to expand public spending and relax various guidelines on the fiscal deficit in order to grow the economy prior to elections. This usually takes place 18 to 24 months before impending elections. The immediate outcome of such spending is higher growth. This allows the government to claim that things are improving and they continue with higher public deficits. Unfortunately, this growth proves temporary. With higher spending comes higher import bills and a balance of payments shortfall, leading to reserves depletion and another trip to foreign lenders asking for a bailout. Why does the current account deficit expand rapidly with higher public spending? Because in Pakistan, imports rise quickly, whereas exports do not. For the last 30 years, there has been a gap between exports and imports, roughly equivalent to 7% of GDP. This is usually filled with the help of foreign borrowing. So how should we get on a path to long-run growth that does not result in a reserves crisis? Now, there are many determinants of long-run growth in Pakistan. There are as many explanations offered as there are commentators. This list includes education, health, demography, productivity, governance, entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. The list is not wrong, but it serves to distract attention from priorities. What should our priorities be? We recommend a focus on expanding exports. This should be preferred for 3 reasons. It increases output, it employs people, and it earns foreign exchange. With just one instrument, exports, 3 very important objectives can be met: growth, employment, and external debt management. At the same time, an export-focused strategy resolves the politician's dilemma, as it does not involve cutting expenditures, raising taxes, or selling state-owned assets. All good policies on their own, but very difficult for politicians to swallow. The export-focused strategy should be based on 2 pillars. The first pillar should be market-based exchange rates. The idea is to let the exchange rate move up or down depending on the demand for rupees and dollars in the market. Most governments chicken out on this once they see a rapid depreciation. They forget that the price advantage of depreciation only works if competitive prices are maintained over a long period of time, many years. This is necessary in order to persuade investors that they should invest in factories to make export goods. The second pillar comprises the enabling environment for exports, featuring reliable supplies of power to factories, good road and port facilities to get exports to markets, and minimal impediments on exporters in the form of regulations, taxes, and red tape in general. Where have such policies worked? Well, all over East and South Asia, starting from the 1960s with Korea and Taiwan, then proceeding through the 1990s with Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, China, and in more recent decades with India, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. This has all been known for the past 6 decades. The difference between successful and unsuccessful growth paths lies in the differing abilities of governments to provide the right policy environment for exports over time. Pakistan has failed at this in the past, but the crises have grown so frequent and so severe that there is now no alternative but to mount an export campaign on an emergency basis. Thank you very much.